New Mexico is alone among the 50 states in having no legislation that speaks to either same-sex marriage or civil unions. Now, that fact makes us very curious as to what the impact will be of the Supreme Court decision this week on the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, or DOMA as we're going to call it here. Now, to offer thoughts is our line opinion panel from the New Mexico Green Chamber of Commerce. Our good friend Laura Sanchez is here. Political reporter from the Albuquerque Journal, Jim Monteleone, is back. From the New Mexico Watchdog website, Rob Nikolewski is here, and returning from the Capitol Bureau of the Texas New Mexico Newspapers Partnership, Milan Simonich is here. Now, Rob, what's your sense of how this will play out in New Mexico? Let's kind of dovetail into our state here. Is this enough to get something moving in either direction?
I think so, and strangely enough, or interestingly enough, Milan and I talked to Brian Egolf, who a Democrat from Santa Fe, who introduced legislation last year trying to get same-sex marriage passed through the legislature, and he's also an attorney, and he is filing, and I believe already has filed with the New Mexico Supreme Court. So there might be a way to get same-sex marriage here, but not through the legislative process, but through the courts, through the Mexico Supreme Court.
Interestingly, let me swing to you on that note. I'm glad you brought that up. If we just in 10, 15 seconds, swing back to what was the issue for legislators and why that did not pass then. I want to tee up our next part of this that Rob mentioned, the potential suits that are coming. But for the legislators, where were they coming from on this idea this past session?
Brian Egolf's bill was to put a constitutional amendment in front of the voters. Do you want to legalize same-sex marriage? And it failed in a committee when 2 Democrats voted against it.
Right. Right. Interesting. Is it your prediction that that would be the same the next session if that had to come up again? And with that, is this the reason why people are now talking about suits instead of legislation?
Well, it might not be the same. The courts will probably settle it first, but if they don't, the governor said yesterday that she wants to see it on the ballot. One of the Democrats who voted against it in committee, Mary Helen Garcia of Las Cruces, said she did not want it on the ballot because of the cost. So you have a difference there, but if the governor says put it on the ballot, I would think it would get through the legislature.
Right. Jim, good to see you again, by the way. Glad you're here. We've got some interesting quotes from some important folks I want to get to in a little bit. However, I want to stay on this political side just for a quick second. Again, there's a lot of idea out there that if one pushes the envelope here, say start suing various people around the state, the Mary Toulouse Olivers of the world, that something's going to get something moving in that direction. Are you convinced that that's the way to go for these folks?
I think that, there's many separate ways to go. There's many sticks in the fire.
Sure.
So going to the root of the lawsuit is certainly a clear path. That comes after the Attorney General earlier this month said that, he believes that the law as it stands is vulnerable and could likely be overturned based on the Equal Protections Clause within our state constitution. In many ways, he gave the green light saying this is a good idea.
Right, right. And we talked about that a few weeks ago, saying that perhaps that's the ideal, Laura, that green light is the direction people need to go at this point. Let's forget about the constitutional stuff. Let's just go there. I want to read you a quote from Peter Simonson from the ACLU of New Mexico, of which I'm a board member as well. Interesting quote here. This should mean same-sex couples who are legally married and living in New Mexico are eligible for all federal benefits. However, we cannot know for certain at this time whether the federal government will extend all federal benefits to legally married same-sex couples in New Mexico. Now, as of Thursday, the president has come out and said he is directing his attorney general and other folks to start getting this stuff in line. That is very impactful on us here. We have so many federal employees, so we have to assume this is going to be an issue for us here in the state. Would you agree with that as well?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, it's what's interesting is I heard, anecdotally that there was people showing up on the morning of the decision, Supreme Court decision, at the county clerk's office in Bernalillo County, and I'm sure other counties, wanting to immediately apply to get married. That's not exactly the effect of the decision at the Supreme Court, but it's still being seen as a huge victory for the LGBT community in terms of equality. The DOMA issue really comes down to recognizing the same federal benefits that a spouse gets that's in a heterosexual marriage, basically extending to same-sex marriages. So it's people who basically have been married in other states or in Canada, for example, who the plaintiff in this case was married in Ontario, and they had a same-sex marriage, and then when one of them passed away, the other one was expecting to have certain benefits that heterosexual couples have, and it was denied based on the Defense of Marriage Act from 1996. So that's the part that got struck down. That was the part that was basically based on the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, seen as unfair, as discriminatory, and so that immediately opens up for a lot of people who have been married in other states legally under their state structure and come here to New Mexico. They are now recognized, or will be recognized through the federal government, as being eligible to receive those benefits. So that's a huge step forward.
Sure.
Now that still doesn't mean that all of a sudden we have marriage, basically that people can go down to the county clerk and
Right.
get married immediately. There's still a state process that needs to happen. But you can also see this particular decision as a states' rights issue. And I think a lot of people are seeing it that way. Essentially, the Supreme Court said, the definition of marriage, or the issue of marriage, same-sex or otherwise, is a state issue. And so each state has, in many cases, done their own decision, whether it's to ban it outright or to recognize it. And New Mexico is able to do that. So now it shifts sort of to the state to figure out, do you do the court, which I think is still a very likely route to take, or do you continue to pursue the legislative route, which would include possibly a ballot initiative. And I think all of those approaches are on the table right now. I think
Right.
it's a huge success.
Interesting. Another quote, I'm going to give this one to you, Rob. Interesting from our delegation, Representative Ben Ray Lujan. Marriage equality is a matter of civil rights and treating all people who are in loving and committed relationships fairly. The Supreme Court's decision today reaffirms our country's commitment to equal treatment under the law. Under the law, that last bit there is an interesting, that's the best part of that juicy thing there, because it seems to me what Laura's describing here, there could be no question now, and I want to ask you about Gary King particularly, that it has to go the way of a court fight. Does Gary King get anything out of this, of advocating that on the stump during his gubernatorial push? Does he get anything by saying this is the way we should go and making this a campaign issue for himself?
I'm not sure because, as Mylon pointed out, the governor came out yesterday and she didn't seem to have any problem with having this thing potentially be on the ballot.
Sure.
And you could make a good argument that these things shouldn't be done
Would
by
she have an
judicial
issue
fiat.
if the idea was to sue for success here? What do you think?
Well, that would be an interesting question. Because the e-golf petition basically it's a way to possibly, if it was successful, it would basically take Section 2 of DOMA, bring that up to the court, and they're asking then that you would institute this not necessarily by judicial fiat, but by it's a interesting kind of a fine line, legalistic line to draw.
Sure.
But what they're asking for is that you would, in all practical purposes, allow or command that the city clerks. Or the county clerks in all 33 counties of the state would have to okay marriage equality. So, I mean, it may not even have to get to the legislative level or even to a ballot initiative if the courts okay that.
It's interesting about that, Mylon, because again, there's people looking for different points of entry here. People are looking to find one renegade, county commissioner. Mary Toulouse Oliver type. Person to lead the charge, exactly, to lead the charge on that. I don't think that's going to happen. So it begs the question, who is going to lead this charge if that is going to happen in political circles? I want to read you another quote here from Representative Steve Pierce to get to the other side of this. The court disregarded the decision to protect traditional marriage in federal law, which was supported by a strong, bipartisan, bicameral majority and signed by President Clinton. Today, Washington interest dealt another blow to the idea of government by the people. What's your sense of that side of the argument here? This usurps something and should be turned back because of that.
I don't think that's valid. Anytime the legislative branch does something, it's subject to being contested in court. And just because it happens late,
Right.
I mean, Brown versus Board of Education in 1954 overturned a decision some 56 years prior, Plessy versus Ferguson. We have a system where unfairness at any time can be corrected if the courts perceive it as such.
Exactly. Got one more quote for you, Jim Monteleone, because I think this is a really important voice here, and part of the argument is the Catholic Church here as well. We have something from Archbishop Michael J. Sheehan. He said, in part, the definition of marriage has radically changed. The repercussions of the court's decision will prove to be very difficult for our society and family law. We respect all our brothers and sisters regardless of sexual identity. little bit of a both sides of the argument there, I guess, but how impactful is the church going to be on any argument here about equality in marriage in New Mexico?
In New Mexico, I mean, the church is certainly a factor that influences many voters
Sure.
in the state. You know, we've got a large number of Catholics that's a primary direction in their voting plans. In the legislature, we hear from the church often on a variety of issues. Most vocally recently, the illegal immigration.
That's right.
Or the practice of providing driver's licenses to undocumented immigrants.
Interesting.
So they like the church weighs in frequently. It likes to flex its political muscle, and it's shown to be effective. That's going to be a key part of the conversation going forward. I mean, that being said, I'm kind of getting back to Steve Pierce's quote. I mean, supporters of same-sex marriage say that the tide is really turning. That opinions today are not the same as they were in the mid-'90s, and it's an ever-growing thing. And so I think in many ways we don't even have a really accurate pulse of to what degree this is the next step forward.
I can't wait to see the polling now that DOMA has come down in the Supreme Court about what happens statewide. We've been at a point of stasis for the last couple of years on this statewide.
Well,
Curious if it's going to move at all. Yeah.
Well, it's already moved so quickly. I mean, 20 years ago, I believe it was Andrew Sullivan, who was writing in the New Republic, was the first person to really talk about gay marriage. And at the time, it just seemed really out there.
Right.
And now the times have changed so much, and it's a generational thing.
Right.
You talk to so many people that are under the age of 30, and being gay is almost like being left-handed.
Right, exactly. There you go. In a moment, we're back with this crew to talk about behavioral health spending in New Mexico and why the agency that administers funding to many providers says it's out of control.